The Bystander Effect in Crime by Taylor Macaulay. What is the bystander effect? The bystander effect is a social psychological phenomenon that refers to cases in which individuals do not offer any means to help a victim when other people are present. The bystander effect is a common issue in social psychology. It takes place in minor issues such as watching someone litter, but can also take place in much larger issues such as people witnessing a crime. Many people believe that if they were able to witness a crime, they would do the right thing and report it, but it's not that easy. The bystander effect has a larger influence and takes place more often than you would think. For example, the Penn State scandal. Jerry Sandusky, an assistant football coach, sexually abused at least 10 boys during and after his position as a coach at Penn State. Joe Paterno, the then head football coach, knew about the alleged abuse and failed to intervene, and also Mike McQueary witnessed the rape of one of Sandusky's victims, but neither of the men did anything to report it to the police. James Bulger, a 2-year-old boy, was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered by 2 older boys in 1990. There were many witnesses who saw the bleeding child with the older boys, but because they claimed to be his brothers, no one intervened. Angel Arce Torres. Angel Torres was crossing the street one day in Connecticut when a car that appeared to be racing with another ran into him. The driver drove away while Angel lay motionless on the ground. Surveillance videos showed several cars drive by Angel, slow down to look at the man, then continue driving. Similarly, several witnesses on the street watched with curiosity, but no one stopped to help him. Eventually, one man went out into the street to check on Angel, and several others followed. Amy Joyner. In 2016, 16-year-old Amy Joyner got into a fight with a girl at school over a boy. A gang of bullies then jumped her in the school bathroom and slammed her head into a sink. Many people witnessed the event, and several even videotaped it. No one thought to get help or call the police, and Amy died later in the hospital. Hugo Alfredo Taliax. In New York in 2010, Hugo Alfredo Taliax was stabbed to death after helping a woman who was being attacked. Nearly 25 people walked past Yax as he lay on the sidewalk dying. Several stared at him, some even took pictures, but no one called the police. He lay there for almost an hour before firefighters arrived. These are just a few of the many examples of the bystander effect that takes place in crime being committed every day. So many deaths and injuries can be prevented if people take the initiative to intervene and call for help. The bystander effect in social psychology. Social psychologists Pilyavin, Roden, and Pilyavin in 1969 studied the bystander effect, and their findings were that bystanders experience emotional arousal when witnessing an emergency. The degree of their arousal is correlated with the degree of the severity of the emergency. Bystanders evaluate both the costs and benefits of intervention. They then choose the response that most efficiently reduces the arousal while also minimizing the costs. Social psychology has helped to further understand the bystander effect. When questioned about not intervening, witnesses always seem to have their own reasoning and explanations for why they did nothing. Many social psychologists have conducted several research studies to determine exactly what factors influence a person to intervene, and even more importantly, what causes them to not. Finding out answers to these questions further our understanding of why people behave the way they do and how we can help people overcome the bystander effect. A lot of research has been done on the bystander effect, and the first one we're going to look at is the analyzation of the Catherine Genovese case. One of the most commonly used examples of the bystander effect is the murder of Catherine Genovese. Catherine was attacked on the streets of New York. She was stabbed and sexually assaulted, and for more than a half hour, this man stalked, stabbed, and raped her. 5 people saw and heard the whole event taking place, and no one thought to intervene or call the police. One witness yelled down from the apartment window to let that girl alone, but the attacker continued to assault Catherine. Even the janitor at the apartment across the street witnessed the events and could have stopped it, but didn't. The man attacked Catherine in 3 separate instances within that half hour. Finally, the police were called when Catherine's friend saw her being stabbed in the stairwell of the apartment, and unfortunately the help was too late, and Catherine died from the stab wounds. Like any case involving the bystander effect, there are situational factors that influence people to not intervene. Arthur Larugio identified 3 primary factors specific to Catherine's case as to why witnesses probably thought they didn't need to do anything. The first is audience inhibition. Audience inhibition is when the witnesses fear that if they intervene and the situation is not an emergency, then their efforts will have been for nothing and they may have embarrassed themselves. With Catherine's case, some of the witnesses had said that they believed it was a lover's quarrel and didn't want to intervene, or the light from their bedroom made it difficult to see the dark streets outside, or they were hesitant to interfere in domestic conflicts, and one even thought that Catherine may have just been intoxicated. The second influence is social influence. Many of the people who witnessed Catherine's murder believe the situation wasn't that serious because nobody else was helping her either. Catherine would have received a lot of help had one person went down to check and see if she was okay. Many times, if nobody is seen helping, others believe their assistance isn't needed either. The third factor is diffusion of responsibility. The area that Catherine was in was so widely populated that no one called the cops because they believed that someone else probably already did. The more people who witness the event, the less people feel that it's their responsibility to take action. Understanding bystander behavior. Now, while we'll never be able to pinpoint exactly why people act the way they do, Brewster and Tucker did extensive research to attempt to begin to understand bystander behavior. They conducted an experiment to determine whether bystander intervention varies by location, situational characteristics, bystander characteristics, and type of intervention. Surveys were administered to 446 undergraduate students at a Pennsylvania university. Each survey contained one of 4 variations of a scenario where the participant reported their hypothetical actions to a potential crime situation. This is the scenario that was given to students. You're on campus, it is 9:05 a.m. and you're on your way early to your 9:30 a.m. class. You are heading up the sidewalk and are a few feet from entering the building where your class is being held when you see a male and female in an argument. The male grabs the female by the wrist and the female yells, "Let go of me." What do? The scenarios varied in that some were located on campus, some located off campus. Sometimes if the participant chose to intervene, it would mean that they were late to class, and sometimes the scenario included a description of the size of the male involved. What Brewster and Tucker concluded was that out of all participants, the men were more likely to intervene than women. This could be because many of the women feared getting involved in a potentially dangerous situation with a large man, or it could have just been because males often feel the need to protect women. The participants who had previous training in either self-defense or life-saving were strongly correlated to help out more often than those who did not. People with previous training in these areas are prepared for situations like these. They know how to defend themselves, and they know that they can help out in emergency situations. More participants said that they would intervene if the situation happened on campus rather than off campus. This indicates that location may have a strong influence on whether or not people intervene in serious situations. For students, campus is a safe place where they would feel confident intervening in a potentially dangerous situation, whereas if it took place on the streets, they would be more cautious about stepping into an intense situation. Time and location of scenarios did not have an effect on the likelihood of intervention by the bystanders, but it did have a significant effect on whether the participant chose to intervene actively or passively. Those off campus were more likely to intervene passively if they intervene at all. Those with a time constraint were also more likely to intervene passively whether they were on campus or off. These results show that a lot of the time when bystanders witness events, the schedule they were on will most likely influence whether they help someone out or not. While many participants said that they would passively intervene by contacting an authority figure or calling the police, the most common participants to take place in active intervention were males given the on-campus scenario. Willingness to report different crimes. Some people are much more willing than others to report certain crimes. When people witness a crime taking place, there are many factors that could influence their need to intervene or call the police. Sarah Nixon investigated some of these factors. In 2013, Sarah Nixon investigated the impact that the situation, bystander gender, anonymity, and relationship with the offender had on college students' willingness to report 3 separate crimes. The crimes investigated were theft, physical assault, and sexual assault. Survey data was collected from 295 college students in New England. Different scenarios were used to determine how the different crime types, situations, anonymity factor, and bystander-offender relationship impacted the willingness of participants to report the crimes. What Nixon found was that the crime type had the largest influence on whether or not students reported the crime. The participants were more likely to report physical assault, then theft, and lastly sexual assault. Although sexual assault is a serious issue that needs to be reported more often, it is seen as ambiguous, so people are less likely to rush and intervene. Specifically with university students, drunken sexual assault is not seen as uncommon. People are lenient to intervene unless it is violent, forceful, or being committed by a stranger. Witnesses would rather believe that they have misinterpreted the events or that it's consensual than believe they have witnessed a sexual assault. Women were more likely than men to report the sexual assault and theft, while both men and women were equally likely to report the physical assault. In comparison with other studies, women are usually more likely to passively report crimes, whereas men are more likely to actively intervene. Especially with sexual assaults, women can identify with the victim and thus influences them to report it more often than men do. Anonymity had no effect on whether participants reported the crimes they witnessed or not. These results conflict with many of the research studies that have found that anonymity does have a factor in whether people report crimes. Anonymity often has an impact when reporting the crime goes against social norms. It might not have been a factor in this case because reporting a theft, physical assault, or sexual assault for the most part does not go against most social norms and is often rewarded. Another possible explanation for this is that participants may have felt that stating that anonymity wasn't a factor was the correct answer on the survey. All the participants were significantly less willing to report the crime when they knew the offender. Similarly, with any crime, all the participants were most likely to report it if the offender was a stranger. Bystanders to violent crimes have the potential to help scare off or fight an attacker, but in certain situations, poorly executed behavior by bystanders may also escalate the attack. In 2008, Hart and Meath used data from the National Crime Victimization Survey to explore the situational context of bystanders in crimes. They looked at data from 1995 to 2004 and identified the most common situations where bystanders are present in crimes. They then looked at what situations bystanders helped alleviate the situation and what situations they harmed it. The highest rates of bystander presence is in physical assaults in public places, and the lowest rates is in sexual assaults. This is because physical assaults can happen anywhere, whereas sexual assaults tend to be committed in more private locations. In physical assaults without a weapon, bystanders rarely help or harm the situation. Many times the assault is over before bystanders even have the opportunity to intervene. Those that do tend to intervene do so because of chivalry, there is less ambiguity than in sexual assaults, and there's a lower risk of injury to themselves. Bystanders are more likely to help in sexual assaults where the offender does not have a weapon. When a weapon is present, the offender has more confidence, and it puts both the bystander and victim in more danger if someone tries to intervene. The most common situations for bystanders to only do harm is in robberies late at night. Robbers who are found in the house tend to lash out violently in order to not be caught. This could put any bystander in danger, especially if they attempt to confront the offender. In conclusion, while many crimes are unpredictable, according to Hart and Meath, bystanders more than likely will help a situation more often than they do harm. People who go out of their way to intervene in situations like these can sometimes make such a difference that they save the life of the victim. Banyer, Plant, and Moynihan conducted an experiment in 2004 to determine if educating their participants on the bystander effect could reduce the likelihood of it occurring. What they found was that by educating people on what the bystander effect was and giving them a few ways to prevent it, people were more likely to react in emergency situations. The first thing that experimenters told the participants that you can do as a bystander is communicate with those around you. If you're part of a crowd of witnesses, establish a plan to intervene to make sure that at least one person helps the victim. The more communication that occurs, the more efficiently the problem will get solved. You can also witness how other people help in different situations. Whether you're aware of it or not, watching how other people help in emergency situations can train you for a time where you might be the only bystander around. In ambiguous situations where you're unsure whether or not there's a need to intervene, you should assess the victim's distress. If they are calling for help or appear to be making an effort to get away from their offender, then it is definitely best to step in. As a bystander, you need to have an awareness of the problem and take into consideration what will happen to the victim if you don't intervene. We need to model helping behavior. Put people in the spotlight who help save lives by intervening, and make people aware of all the good that they can do in emergency situations. Lastly, we need to educate people on how to intervene and what to expect by intervening. We need to teach them beliefs about what is right and wrong so they can properly assess the situation, and we need to teach them the proper problem solving and communication skills that they would need in order to diffuse the situation. It's been proven in several studies that people who are aware of the bystander effect are less likely to be influenced by it. If we educate people on the issue of the bystander effect, then they will be more likely to be active in emergency situations. In conclusion, the bystander effect is common across many cases, but it doesn't have to be. By further educating people, we can make the world a safer place and help prevent the horrible things that happened to Catherine Genovese, Amy Joyner, James Bulger, and many others. We are the ones who choose whether or not we're going to be bystanders or interveners. Hopefully, after learning about the bystander effect, more people are aware of the fact that taking a few minutes out of their day to check on someone who's lying on the ground, or maybe even just making a quick phone call to report something that might be potentially dangerous, could in fact save someone's life.